16 years in power, the Conservatives are engaged in a battle for the soul of their party. In True Blues, two leading Conservative thinkers offer their rival personal visions of what Conservatism is and should be. Roger Scruton is a writer and philosopher, and one of the most influential intellectual Conservatives of his generation. In 1982, he founded the Conservative journal The Salisbury Review to reassert the traditional Tory vision of British society. He has a farm in Wiltshire where he writes and composes.
Conservatism arose in England as a reaction to the French Revolution. The new style of continental politics required not custom, compromise and law, as over here, but a kind of collective march of the people towards the future. Time and again, continental politicians have tried to conscript the people into an army and set them marching towards a certain goal. This happened with communism, with fascism and Nazism, and now it is happening again. The forced march of Europe towards union. At the heart of the European idea lies collectivism. Labour politicians once rejected Europe, suspecting a capitalist plot. Now they welcome it as a means to reimpose socialist planning. They were right both times. We were signed up to Europe by managerial conservatives, and we are now part of a socialist superstate. There are two kinds of Tory, those like Margaret Thatcher, for whom conservatism is a social and moral idea, and those like Edward Heath, who see politics as a kind of super-management. The visionary conservatives are suspicious of Europe. The managers welcome it as a boost to their merger mania.
Of course, the chairman or the president of the Commission, Mr. Delors, said at press conference the other day that he wanted the European Parliament to be the democratic body of the community, he wanted the Commission to be the executive, and he wanted the Council of Ministers to be the Senate. No, no, no.
Margaret Thatcher's opposition to Europe stemmed from true conservative convictions. And they are convictions that the British people largely share, as my friend Gary Bushell explains.
I think the Conservative Party, since Mrs Thatcher, has lost its sense of direction. It doesn't really know what way it's going. It's floundering. The British people are instinctively against Europe because they can see that Europe is a complete mess. It is everything that we should be trying to get away from. It's over-centralised, it's bureaucratic, it's very slow, it's meddlesome, it's unaccountable, it's anti-democratic in the sense that, as P.J. O'Rourke described it, it's become a dictatorship of boredom. It's so impenetrable, you can't begin to fathom out what it's all about, all these directives endlessly going about between different places. And all these things are being imposed on us from above, much against the wishes of the British people.
The European machine is now in place, and many people feel that we cannot escape it. Ian Duncan Smith gives the true Tory message.
For the Conservatives, who believe in very much a bottom-up approach, that is to say, communities, individuals exercising decisions for themselves, Europe is the opposite to that in many senses, where a sort of noblesse oblige, a concept of big government with the corporate state ruling, that seems very much to be the ethos, and that's where the two cultures and concepts clash so clearly. The problem for the political establishment in Britain has been that the more that they associate with this European juggernaut, the more their message is pushed to the British people on the basis of fear. It's reminiscent of the 1930s and the terrible concept of appeasing Hitler. It's the idea that somehow the forces out there are too big and too inevitable, and that there isn't much you can do about it.
Rolling back the state means rolling back the European superstate. We are now at a turning point in history. Surely we can decide that it is better for the British people to make their own laws and to raise their own taxation than to surrender their independence, for which so many of their ancestors fought and died in exchange for the tinsel bribes of Brussels. After the defeat of Germany, governments believed that we must plan for peace as we had planned for war. The state was now in charge, and people must submit to those who knew what was best for them. Managerial conservatives from Macmillan to Heath went along with this socialist folly.
It becomes more than ever a matter of forward planning, on a world scale, on a local scale. Now, on the even more sensitive scale, which newfound local ambitions and different...
Merthyr Tydfil lost its industries and turned instead to the state, which has ways of making people welcome their dependency on it. Socialism means planning, equality, uniformity. And the paradox is that it was imposed upon Britain by our most colourful people, the Celts. And they were motivated largely by conservative feelings. They wished to preserve the Welsh working class communities against the unpredictable forces of English capitalism. British socialism is not so much the opponent of conservatism as a mistake that conservatives are liable to make. It happens when people wishing to conserve some traditional community enlist the state as its protector. Inevitably, the community then becomes dependent on the state. Enterprise, initiative, and charity all expire, along with the original socialist ideals. And in place of them, there comes a uniform drabness and depression.
Socialists and managerial conservatives have always wanted to plan every aspect of our lives, I think for very good reasons from their own point of view. They believe that it's possible for the state to take over the running of our lives and make life perfect for people. Unfortunately, socialism has never ever understood human motivation. It's never understood what makes people go out and do things. And it's failed to recognise that some people are basically lazy or scrounging or evil, that it doesn't realise that people are different.
The miners relied on the state to employ them, the unions to defend them, and the taxpayer to foot the bill. But their industry was in decline, and when the foundations gave way, the miners were ripe for manipulation. The Stalinist Arthur Scargill believed he could use them to destroy the very state which had been their protector. Instead, it was the union that was destroyed, and the mining communities are no more. Managerial conservatives who want a European superstate should remember the fate of the miners. Those who live by the state die by the state. Always when the state takes over our social and economic life, the tale is the same. The community spirit dies, and people retreat at last into the solitude of their own hearts. The British people believe in dialogue, but dialogue produces conservative solutions, and the Liverpool extremists were against it. They penetrated unions and local government so as to gain control over people whom they could never openly persuade. Such was the militant regime of Derek Hatton.
Whatever Thatcher may say, whatever even the leadership of our own movement say, we're going on to the end, we're going on to win, and we shan't be defeated.
The 1980s saw a visionary conservatism emerge that dared to do what had been declared impossible. Schools were handed back to the teachers and parents who cared. Brother Francis, you took your school out of the state sector into grant-maintained status. Can you tell me the background of this and how it happened?
Yes, it was very quickly after the 1988 Education Reform Act. We were seeing the school actually going downhill fast. We were being almost denuded of resources. We saw the way the local authority was terribly wasteful at that time, and that education was not a priority in their thinking, in their political thinking. And we saw in the grant-maintained movement, here we had an opportunity to actually put the resources that were there for education actually into the school and not into the bureaucrats of Liverpool City Council. You know, what is it? Who are they? Faceless things that they used to be. I mean, we used to deal with people in the local authority that we never met. Now, we know where the buck stops in the school.
And what about the opposition? I mean, there must have been some attempt to prevent this, wasn't there?
Well, I think it's well documented that the the opposition was huge. Obviously, the political opposition locally, remembering that Liverpool City Council was then run by the militant regime in the early 90s, yes, it was total opposition. Teacher unions, especially the NUT, certainly opposed us vehemently. In fact, they managed to picket even at executive level from the union, the parents' meetings that we held. Yes, I have to say it was very bitter, and it got very personally bitter against myself even, but we could see through and beyond all that in the interest of the future of the school, and that was vital for us.
People are never grateful for state support, for how can you be grateful to a machine? But when individuals take the initiative and act out of public spirit, the whole atmosphere changes. Where there was churlishness, there is now cooperation. Where there was anger, there is hope. In 1988, Lloyd's of London celebrated 300 years of tradition. And how? It went wild with self-advertisement and dropped a postmodernist bomb on the heart of London. Yet Lloyd's was a symbol of British business at its best, a private society in which individuals made great enterprises possible by risking all they owned. But Lloyd's lost touch with its origins. It joined the rat race and squandered money on this monstrous building, which sneers at the old way of doing things and has no other meaning but money. Pride comes before a fall, and Lloyd's fell. The storms that wrecked so much of our country blew a hole in Lloyd's. Investors discovered that their money was not, after all, in safe hands. But if Conservatives follow Socialists and try to eliminate risk, they will merely subsidise the rich, and no one will thank them.
The Conservative Party has been harmed, I think, by being seen in the public's eye as looking after the rich. Like there seems to be one law for the rich and another for the poor, which shouldn't exist. There is no reason why people who take the gamble with their own money on Lloyd's should be subsidised by the state any more than people who gamble on the lottery and lose should be subsidised by the state. It's your money, it's your risk, you pay the price.
An economy is not healthy because vast sums of money migrate mysteriously between cold steel towers. It is healthy when businesses thrive in congenial places, and when young people take risks and start up ventures of their own. Mark, John and David founded Perspective Publishing 2 years ago. Already they employ 14 people and also sustain printing jobs in Merthyr Tydfil.
The original idea actually came in a pub over a pint of beer. You work out on the figures and you say, OK, this all adds up and we believe in our ability, so we're going to do it. And you work hard and make sure you achieve and follow the sort of planning you put in beforehand.
We all worked for various sort of publishing houses of differing sizes, and I think we'd come to the conclusion that the ideas we had and the rate at which we wanted to move forward in our respective careers were just not going to be met by working for other people.
It's very satisfying to feel that if you make a mistake, it's going to be your responsibility. But on the other hand, if you have success, it's to your credit. I think I would speak for all of us when I say, having done what we've done, none of us would want to go back and work for somebody else again.
The real problem for young people is that in the attitudes of politicians from all parties, the socialist mindset remains, discouraging risk and clipping the wings of enterprise, as here in my hometown of Swindon. Suppose someone said to you, you're not trying hard enough. Andrew, what do you say in response to that?
A lot of people have said that to me, but I think I do try quite hard. Don't get enough recognition for it than I should do, I think, but at the end of the day, at the moment there's nothing really I can do. I can't really go anywhere. It's just money. At the end of the day, it's just shortage of money and experience with getting a job. That's what you need, experience, like Zena said earlier. If you ain't got experience, you can't do anything.
Suppose this whole system of support, income support and unemployment benefit and so on, housing benefit and all the rest was just taken away. How would you envisage yourself surviving, if at all?
How will I survive?
What would you do?
Turn to crime.
Would you?
Yeah, it would give us no option at all, even if we're not like that. It'd be, I mean, it wouldn't be violent crime or anything like that, but there'd be a lot of dodging and dealing going on. Definitely. Personally, I'd get a job, but...
Yeah, but what sort of job are you
really
prepared to accept? You could go into the job centre on Monday.
Yeah, you could
I could, and I could get a job, but
some...
you don't want to be a toilet attendant, do you?
No, but I love nannying, but it's the money side that stops me doing it.
Anyone can get a job, can't they? Do you know what I mean? But if I was to get a job that I really hated, thought was crap,
be there
a couple of hours and sack it, and then on your references, then you're writing down, aren't you? Saying, well, yeah, I've done this and I've done that, and then the way they look at it is because you didn't like the job. Right. Can you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's just going to make it look worse on your reference then.
Suppose you came along and said, look, I've got no job, and they said, well, look, here, we're going to give you a once-off payment of £5,000 or whatever. You go away and take that and see what you can do with it, like start a business or whatever. Would you prefer that?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. Just say a bit more as to why. Because it's interesting.
I'm a trained painter and decorator, you see. I could start my own, I'd just go SEs. Yeah, just start my own business. It'd be so simple, but...
You've never had the capital?
Yeah, the funding's just not there, is it? You hear about all these enterprise things. What are they, £35 a week? It's like being on the YTS, isn't it?
It's ridiculous.
But then, suppose you took the £5,000 and it failed. You know, what then?
It wouldn't fail though, in my case, because I know it wouldn't fail.
You make it.
Let it fail.
Yeah, because that's the only option you've got.
That would be it. That would be your life. So you'd have to make it work.
Zena's philosophy is the right one. The nanny state has not destroyed the desire for risk. These young people would shoulder the cost if they had the opportunity.
Well, young people have been brought up to think that they won't have to go out to work, they don't need to, the state is going to look after them, when really we should give them the other message being that you need to go out, you need to stand on your feet, you need to carve out a career, carve out a job, carve out a business, whatever. That should be the message we should be giving people, not that that's okay, go and have a baby and we'll look after you. Don't worry about having a husband or whatever.
Dependency destroys initiative. It destroys goodwill. It destroys hope. Yet today, 1/4 of the population of Britain depends on welfare. Conservative governments have continued to manage a socialist system and have shied away from changing it. Yet the time has come to wean people away from welfare, to put self-help, friendship and charity in place of the nanny state.
Bill Reid is a jazz musician, and 30 years ago he started a club for young people. He followed his instincts, took risks, and the business grew. Now he owns the Brunel Rooms in Swindon, where these young people congregate. Bill has not lost his faith in them.
They call it clubbing when they come here. They're against people with attitudes. And the attitude to the girls, the way everybody mixes, the whole room comes alive, you'll see it later on, and the dancing and the music. This is a wonderful generation, and we just leave them alone. We just provide a nice place, and they set it up and they make it all go.
It is we, and not the state, who must care for and encourage the young. But few of us teach them about the wider world, or about the past. So why should they care for the future? Lost in the present moment, they scatter their energies on the winds of time. Managerial conservatism speaks of progress, but if you don't know the past, you cannot guess the future, and progress is nothing but a word. The managers provide young people with no idea of where they have come from. Bill Reid's generation was luckier.
Well, yes, I am a Conservative, Roger, and I think it's as little government interference as possible. I think that's the essence of it.
And what about the sense of community?
Yeah,
where does that come from?
Well, you're an individual and you're working for yourself, but of course we're tribal creatures. We have to do it as a group. I mean, I'm in the Brunel Rooms tribe, I'm in the VWH Hunt tribe, and on this farm I work with people, and we work for the common good. But it's done by compromise, by talking to each other, by feeling our way through things. We don't need to be told by central authorities how to do it. We want to do it together for the joint good.
So what do you feel is the main danger then to conservative politics in the modern world?
Well, I tell you what, my own pet hate are the single issue groups. Look at them, you've got them campaigning against the transport of calves. This is a single suckler herd. I mean, these animals are living in a cattle paradise. I want to look after these animals, I care for them, and I rear them to be sold as meat for a profit.
So you would think of one of the roles of a Conservative government as precisely protecting people from that kind of thing?
Oh yes, I would have hoped that they
so
would protect us from the special interest groups, but they seem to be more and more listening to them. They should beware of these people. They should listen to the ordinary people who live in the countryside, who live in the suburbs, who want to just be left alone and get on with their own thing and work and earn some money, keep as much of it as possible and spend it how they want.
The single-issue fanatics are the enemies of harmony. Yet the British have a genius for harmony and discover it everywhere. We are criticised as a class society, but just as soon as the busybodies leave us alone, we come peacefully together, as here at Haydock Park Racecourse. Managerial politicians do not trust people to make good use of their freedom. Yet we should not fear competition, for competition is the factor which creates social harmony by causing people to take an interest in each other and to admire and emulate what is attractive and good.
Also our judges are mingling among racegoers to choose the best dressed lady in competition.
Business and enterprise play a part in Conservative philosophy, but it should be only a small part. Conservatism is, at bottom, a moral idea. It derives from respect for ordinary people, ordinary decencies, and ordinary ways of doing things. Conservatives believe that left to themselves, people will create order, dignity, and happiness. The brass band and socialism arose from a common root, the non-conformist culture of the industrial towns. The generations here come together in a sense of their common life and destiny. This is the small Tory community, outside the reach of the managers. The band thrives through friendly competition. It breathes the soul of our parents into the limbs of our children, and like every free society, it is both proud of its traditions and able to pass them on with a smile.
Well, it's an activity that appeals to a really wide range of people. There are people from all walks of life, doctors, nurses, teachers, unemployed people, white people, coloured people, disabled people. We've got one chap in the band who's disabled. The youngest player is 8 years of age. The oldest is 70-something. You name it, it's a whole wide range of people, and a truly non-discriminatory activity.
A Conservative politician who is true to my vision does not seek to absorb society into some managerial machine. The fanatics who influence the Labour Party would ban horse racing just as they would ban the transport of Bill Reid's calves. For an authentic Conservative, politics exists not to control people, but to free them, and to allow the competitive instinct to bring them again together.
Well, conservatism is divided, has always been divided into two competing themes. One is very much the small Tory, the small grouping, the small community, the individual under free association driving forward, which makes up the large majority of the Conservative Party, particularly the grassroots. And the other is what I call the big wig theme, those who like big government, intervention, almost on a sort of European scale, the large-scale side of things. Not an ideas-based machine, but very much just a managerial game. People who like power and who like exercising power, and they graft themselves very much on to the Conservative engine. And on the right is really where the ideas and where the drive comes from.
Two roads lie before us. Along one, we see the glass towers of the European superstate, and faceless crowds who have lost all sense of their identity, who take no responsibility for their own lives and care little for the lives of others. Along the other road, we see a thriving and eccentric people, proud of their liberties and eager to take risks for the future. We see the townscape and landscape of Britain, the clubs and communities of a free society, and the customs and traditions which no one has ever taken from us and which we should not now give away.
In part 2 of True Blues, Maurice Fraser, until recently special advisor to Douglas Hurd, will set out his alternative vision of conservatism. In this second part of True Blues, Maurice Fraser, who has been special advisor to Geoffrey Howe, John Major and Douglas Hurd, gives his view about what conservatism is and should be.
Here it is, the dismal Britain presided over by a Conservative government. Soulless mass culture, our children living on a diet of mindless junk, the destruction of good manners, and everyone out for themselves. Of course, this is a ludicrous caricature. People using their freedoms offends Big Brother on the left. For the cultural reactionaries, it's all deeply unsettling. Every generation since the end of the Roman Republic has moaned that society is going down the plug hole. Somehow, though, society
and interesting place. The terribly genteel Tories have presided over an explosion of popular culture, music, street life and ideas, like the National Lottery, doubling the money for the arts.
British society has changed. There is no turning back. The traditional nuclear family happens to suit me quite well, but we nuclears are now only a quarter of households. This society is more lonely and troubled. Modern life comes with a high price tag, but it is sheer fantasy to suppose we can rebuild a society where everyone knows their place, defers to their betters, never divorces, and never strays from the straight and narrow. And it is absurd to pretend that people have suddenly forgotten how to treat each other with consideration and respect.
Conservatives pride themselves on keeping their feet on the ground. Like most people, they feel the pull of nostalgia. But when they vote, they're like everybody else. They vote for the future, not the past.
The Conservative Party is a curious beast. Love it or loathe it, you have to understand it, because it's usually in power. In fact, the Tory party has been the most successful party, not just in Britain, but in Europe. So how has it done it? Not by pitching just for the rich, that's for sure. The Conservative Party has always had to cast its net widely, to champion the interests of the many, not the few. In a nutshell, the Conservative Party has had to be an inclusive party, not an exclusive one.
It could hardly be otherwise. The last three Tory leaders were not exactly born with silver spoons in their mouths.
Conservatives believe that you mustn't leave anybody out. Marxists believe that you slice society horizontally and there are classes which count and classes which can be despised or destroyed. Conservatives don't believe that. There is nobody in an inner city, in the Highlands and Islands, a black man, a white man, there's nobody who can be left out deliberately. You must try, you won't always succeed, in bringing everybody in.
For millions of British people, the Tory party helps to provide some of our most cherished mental furniture. The nation, the monarchy, the family, our British way of doing things. Tories do not own patriotism, but they have always tapped into that feeling of continuity with our past and pride in our achievements as an island race. By providing a respectable outlet for patriotism, the Conservatives have kept racist and extremist parties to a tiny fringe. We've been saved from a homegrown Jean-Marie Le Pen. This is the largest Hindu temple in the world, outside India. But there's a palace just a few miles away, where black and Asian Britons are all too rare. The Palace of Westminster.
Well, there is now a black middle class which is growing, and they are theoretically going to be attracted to traditional values which the Conservative Party supports, like family values, self-reliance, belief in law and order. But that's the theory. I think the Conservative Party needs to go a long way to woo that growing group towards it. There are many prominent black people in this country, celebrities who are conservatives, but they're probably closet conservatives because they're rather bad sort of persona that the party has. I've got no sympathy for the party in this respect. They need to do more, in my view, to woo the ethnic minorities. We do need to govern our country. Somebody has to, and it happens to be the Conservatives at the moment. So I would say that black people need to look at what's on offer and not to think, well, I'm black, therefore I can only be a socialist.
So how long before we have a black cabinet minister?
I think it'll happen. I wouldn't like to put a time or a date on it, but I'm somebody who always believes that the glass is half full, not half empty. I'm ever optimistic. Having fought Cheltenham, you have to be an optimist.
Enterprise is what conservatism is all about. Like this family-owned magazine empire built up from nothing. Another modern buzzword with a good Tory pedigree is community. Enterprise and community. Asian Britons can teach us a lot about both.
There is obviously a lot of natural affinity between the Asian community and the Conservative Party. We share family values and we share business values as well. But it doesn't help having certain racist elements within the Conservative Party who are actively against recruiting Asian people into the party. And it doesn't help when politicians like Norman Tebbit say, where do you stand on the cricket test? Because as first-generation immigrants, although we are British Asians, we're bound to have a certain amount of affinity to our home country, and we're bound to feel for Britain as well. Imagine if America and Britain were playing football together. I would obviously, as a British Asian, support Britain, and if England and India were playing cricket together, I'd probably leave the country and not want to know what the cricket scores were. But we obviously, as British Asians, would like to have more representation of Asian MPs into the House of Commons. But to start off with, the Conservative Party could appoint certain Asian people into the House of Lords.
Nearly 5 million Britons come from ethnic minorities. Many of them are concentrated in urban marginal seats. Bluntly, their votes matter. The Conservative Party has been building up its support amongst the ethnic minorities, but it still has to show it can offer a really welcoming political home. It's got to do a lot better.
These pictures aren't earth-shattering, but they are important. They are flats and a sports centre specially adapted for the disabled. It's what an enlightened Tory borough, Kensington and Chelsea, is building with local people and the local housing association. The same council has found another way to harness private initiative to the public good. It has persuaded a private company to provide the first door-to-door collection service in the country for recyclable waste. Once again, pragmatic Toryism delivers the goods.
Well, I think this is probably a very successful example of the public sector in the form of the council and the private sector in the form of our contractors, BFI, working together to actually provide a service which the council wishes to provide and which the public wish to see, and also it's successful commercial business as well.
Some Tories argue that all this greenery is just some passing fad of the urban middle class. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I think that there's a great popularity behind this scheme, particularly in Kensington and Chelsea. A lot of people have been concerned to contribute to the recycling scheme. The amount of material that we're actually recycling at the moment is going up, and I think people find it a sensible way of conserving resources.
Of course, values are important in politics, but people can't eat values. There is no substitute for good, practical ideas and policies that deliver the goods. That's what we pay politicians for. But it's for people, not politicians, to put life into the increasingly popular idea of community. We have more voluntary groups in Britain than almost any other country.
We shouldn't dismiss voluntary groups as worthy amateurs. Most of them are hard-edged and practical, like the Apex Job Club in one of London's most deprived areas, Haringey.
Well, we're an independent resource centre and we offer practical help, advice and support for long-term and short-term unemployed to help them with employment, further education or training.
Is there anything you can do for that hard core of unemployed who seem almost impossible to find employment for?
Well, there was a guy called Jim who came to Apex and he'd given up all hope of finding work. He was over 50 and had been long-term unemployed. And after a couple of months with us, we managed to get him a permanent job with Haringey Council as an estate service officer, and he's still working there. And all his confidence has come back and his pride, and he's just a reformed character completely.
Conservatives value society's little platoons, but we need them in our cities, not just the shires.
I found that with the Apex Centre, they try and help you as much as possible with your degree of work and experience that you have and the specific needs for you.
Well, I'm getting help from the people at the Apex Job Club, doing computer maintenance, but really and truly, basically right now, I'm just thinking about getting paid and just looking for a job, really and truly. But in the long term, computer maintenance, that's what I want to do.
I've been coming here, they've been helping me out, like Robert said, with the interview techniques and like telling me what the employer wants to see in the application forms and like how to present it across to my best advantage.
These people aren't particularly interested in politics. They're certainly not interested in dogma from the left or the right. What they are interested in is finding something interesting and worthwhile. That's what this voluntary project is about, finding flexible local solutions, people using their imagination to make modern society a little more human.
A few lonely Conservatives toy with the abolition of welfare. But Tory leaders have a proud record of social reform, and if Tories only talked about public services as much as they funded them, they'd get a bit more credit for a health service which they have largely built up.
A new hospital building programme is underway, and in England and Wales, 6,000 new beds and an additional 1,000 in Scotland will be provided as the result of the work which we are doing in rebuilding and extending the existing hospitals of this country. But national health is not only a question of putting up new hospitals. The general health of the nation is our prime concern, and it continues to improve. We think that the education of our children, the pensions for our old people, and the health of the nation are all worth spending money on.
I don't know what abolishing the welfare state means. It can't really mean just shoving the miserable and the unfortunate into the gutter. That's certainly not a conservative philosophy. That's what Disraeli set himself against. But of course it has to change all the time as the needs change. And the financing has to change, the way it's run has to change. Conservatives have to be reformers of welfare, but not abolishers of welfare.
Of course, most NHS hospitals don't look quite like this. But I chose the Chelsea in Westminster because of the way it is running itself as a successful NHS trust. Where Labour defends the status quo, the Tory party has pursued imaginative reform. So which is the Progressive Party?
The key feature since the reforms came in, as far as I'm concerned, has been a much more focus on the patient. As a hospital, we have to be sure that we attract a large number of patients in order to ensure the future of the hospital. Secondly, I think the Patient's Charter, which has come in since the reforms, have also increased the focus on the patient. So we haven't fully succeeded yet, but we try and make the patient the focus of everything that we do, and I'm not sure that was always the case in the past.
And what proportion of your patients are actually private patients?
We actually have very few private patients in this hospital. We, in fact, last month opened a 15-bed private patient unit, but we have more than 500 NHS beds open, so it is about 3% of our beds, so it's actually quite peripheral to the main work of the hospital.
We're often told that the NHS is now run by managers. Are the doctors happy with the new system in this hospital?
We haven't really found a confrontational problem here between doctors and managers. We've managed to work together very effectively, I think. But basically it means that we've devolved the decision-making down to a more local level, so that the hospital has far more control over the decisions relating to its future.
Wandering around this building, I've been very struck by the number of works of art spread liberally all over the place. What's the thinking behind the Arts for Health project?
During the building and commissioning of the hospital, a number of doctors felt that it was very important that we had art in the new hospital. They strongly believe in its therapeutic effect. So an amount of fundraising was done. The special trustees of the hospital supported the project and made sure we had quite a lot of art when the hospital opened.
The Japanese company Makita employs 500 local people here in Telford. The Japanese aren't here because they like the colour of our eyes, but because Britain offers a springboard into the European single market, the largest trading bloc in the world.
Our orders that go out are to Europe. A few going down to the Far East now, so we're expanding further to where we're supplying to.
Do you think Britain could ever be a successful trading nation if it pulled out of Europe?
No, we wouldn't be able to do it.
I think it'd be crazy because with the European countries it gives opportunity, better job opportunity all round over here and overseas. I've worked abroad before and we're all dependent on each other for jobs and we can move around. We're not just stuck to one country, we can move around with job opportunities everywhere.
% of the drills exported from here go to Europe, and Europe takes over half of Britain's manufactured exports.
Well, basically, Makita sees itself very much as a company working within the European Union. With our markets being in Europe, we have to be in there and being part of it. There's no guarantee that a European Union without Great Britain would strike any special deals with Great Britain, so that we could find the market far more difficult for us to get into. At the end of the day, we're a trading nation. We need to be able to trade with all of the major marketing blocks in the world. And the European Union is one of the major marketing blocks. I doubt very much, for example, that Makita would have come to Telford if we had not been part of the European Union.
Britain's interests. If the Tories ever lost sight of them, they would be finished as a party of power.
We hope to see a Europe where men of every country will think as much of being a European as of belonging to their native land.
Always far-seeing, the man who has helped to shape the history of his time was not afraid to read the signs of the future and promote those tendencies which would work for the benefit and safety of mankind.
The nation-state is going to remain, I'm sure of that. But equally, the nations can't achieve things by themselves that they want to, whether it's the environment or prosperity or safety. So the nations have to work together. They're not going to be submerged in a super-state, that's for sure. But equally, if they try and pretend they can do everything by themselves, they're going to come to grief. Now, this government, under this Prime Minister, has got that balance right. And we have to maintain that balance.
We are members of the European Union because every Conservative leader, from Harold Macmillan to Margaret Thatcher and John Major, understood that Britain's power and influence in Europe and the world could only be maintained by playing our full part in Europe. No one put that case as robustly as Margaret Thatcher did during the 1975 referendum.
I hope that within 48 hours we shall know the result, and it will be a splendid and decisive yes for Britain in Europe, for your generation and the whole of the next one. I like this torch. Oh dear.
So much for European
The bad lighter, not the bad torch.
Can you just take one hand down?
Yes.
There's always been a muscular brand of conservatism. Its self-appointed champions insist that they speak for ordinary party members. But if they actually bothered to talk to most Tories, as I did in Telford, they would not find them hard-nosed. Even on the most controversial issues, they are thoughtful and realistic.
I think that we've got a right in this country not to disadvantage our future generations by keeping out of what can be very lucrative and bring greater prosperity to this country.
To trade is fine, but we just don't want to go on giving into Europe's rules and whatever it is, and single currency, no way.
You may be speaking for your branch, you're not speaking for our branch.
No, well, I'm speaking for me and for our branch.
We know that we have in the past been extremely successful in running governments in a very efficient way and making the country prosperous. And because of that, the money is cascaded through the economic groups in society until in the end, ordinary working people in the street were voting Conservative. Very happy to do so.
Here in Telford, we have a wonderful new hospital which was built through the years. I can remember marching with the miners of Telford here, and I was one of 2 women out of the area that marched with them to keep the Cosford Hospital open. This was in about 1968. Sadly, that wasn't to be, but we fought from then to get this Princess Royal, and I think everyone in this room has helped towards that. And as a member of the Friends, I've been down this morning, and we've just presented a cheque for 50,000 from the League of Friends towards some equipment for the heart unit. But that hospital is wonderful. We have a wonderful atmosphere there. They're all happy, they work together as a team, and we are getting all the waiting lists cut down. And I do think we're not making enough of this.
I think we should perhaps leave the moralising to our church leaders and our philosophers. Government is there to enable and to facilitate individuals to pursue their own gains and their own purposes in life.
I take great exception to this idea that a political party should moralise and preach. It seems to me quite out of place, and people watching this programme would smile at the idea that a political party can in some way influence the number of single-parent families. It's nonsense.
I mean, he spoke when he was made leader of a classless society, and I'm sure that that is what the Conservative Party, that is its wishes, that we do want a classless society. And the last thing I want to see is us talking about the underclasses and the middle class. I think we want to be responsible for all people in the country.
Look at how many Conservative policies are being embraced by the opposition parties. There must be an awful lot to be said for it.
How many of you would actually oppose the return of capital punishment? 1, 2, sorry. And so that's 8 of you opposed, so that's actually a majority of you actually would oppose the return of capital punishment. The grassroots activists I met in Telford had been chosen completely at random. Frankly, I'd been expecting a rougher ride for my brand of conservatism. Interestingly, I found little support for capital punishment and little appetite for saying a plague on Europe and all its works. But I did find one common, uniting theme. Conservatives want freedom and prosperity.
There are 2 ways of approaching politics. You can do what the left and the far right does, pretend to believe in human beings, but spend your time trying to regiment them, punish them, or improve them. Or you can take the optimistic view, the true Tory view. Accept people warts and all, trust them, and help them to make something of their lives. But Tories never forget that some people need that extra bit of help.
The Tory party must resist the siren voices calling for special measures and tax concessions for middle-class, Middle England. That prescription is morally wrong, economically inefficient, and certain to come unstuck at a general election. The next stage of the Conservative revolution must be to spread the fruits of prosperity further still. There is a portion of society we have yet to reach. That won't happen until the politicians steer the welfare state towards those whom it is supposed to serve. The Labour Party is far too conservative for the next revolution. If the Tories don't carry it out, no one will.
Women are still dying from this. It's absolutely atrocious.
We need to be out there. We need to be campaigning.
How do I get them to stop?
Stranded beyond the stars on a new Earth.
My rescue is here finally after all these years.
The pioneers discover a fellow voyager.
I've been alone on this planet for 15 years. No one to keep me company.
Guest starring Tim Curry.
So here they sent us.
Earth 2, Wednesday at 8, Sky 1 prime time.